He came to fix a faulty circuit, but when she whispered, "You're not a kid anymore," the air between them crackled with a forbidden truth, leaving him breathless and the door to an unknown future ajar. The late afternoon sun, usually a generous golden presence, struggled to pierce the dense canopy of ancient oaks guarding Stonehurst Manor. Thaddeus Thad Merriweather, at 23, felt the weight of that fading light, an unusual somberness for what should have been a straightforward electrical repair. He backed his weathered Ford Ranger with its familiar Merriweather Electrical Services logo into the gravel drive, the crunch of tires beneath him the loudest sound in the vast, almost oppressive silence of the estate. Unlike the suburban homes of Willow Creek, where his days were usually spent coaxing reluctant appliances back to life or upgrading antiquated fuse boxes, this place exuded a different kind of challenge. Rumors about Elysia Vance, the manor's reclusive mistress, still drifted through Oakhaven like the morning mist, whispers of tragedy, of an unexplained loss that had left her a spectral figure in the grand, decaying house. His uncle, Silas Merriweather, a man of few words but considerable professional integrity, had taken the call. "Library circuit, Thad. Bit of a ghost in the machine, it seems. Mrs. Vance is particular. Just get it done." He'd arrived with his usual tools, but with a less usual knot of apprehension tightening in his gut. The manor itself, a sprawling Victorian Gothic behemoth, seemed to breathe history, its dark, leaded glass windows gazing out like unblinking eyes into the encroaching shadows. A path, faintly discernible beneath a tangle of overgrown ivy, led to a formidable oak door, adorned with a heavy, snarling lion's head knocker. Thad, usually unflappable, felt a strange ripple of unease as he lifted it, the brass cold and weighty beneath his fingers. The sound echoed, resonant and hollow, as if the house itself had sighed. Footsteps, light yet deliberate, approached from within, the subtle creak of ancient floorboards signaling an imminent encounter. The door opened slowly, revealing not the stern elderly housekeeper Thad had half expected, but a woman who seemed to defy the very atmosphere of the house. Elysia Vance stood silhouetted against the dimness of the grand foyer, an arresting figure. Her hair, the color of burnished auburn, was swept up in a loose, elegant chignon, but a few rebellious tendrils had escaped, softening the sharp angles of her jawline. Her eyes, a startling hazel, held a profound depth, a quiet sorrow that seemed to pull at something deep within him, an ache that mirrored the hushed melancholy of the house. She wore a simple, charcoal gray dress that nonetheless draped with an innate elegance, hinting at a slender frame beneath the modest fabric. Thad, suddenly acutely aware of the grease smudges on his work pants and the frayed collar of his t-shirt, felt an uncomfortable warmth creep up his neck. He stammered, his usual confident demeanor dissolving. "Mrs. Vance? I'm Thaddeus Merriweather, from Merriweather Electrical. My uncle Silas sent me. For the library circuit." A fleeting, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips, a brief, fragile light in the shadowed expanse of her face. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind only that quiet weariness. "Yes, Mr. Merriweather, I was expecting you. Please, come in." Her voice was soft, melodic, yet carried a profound exhaustion that seemed to hum beneath the surface. She stepped back, allowing him entry, and the massive oak door swung shut behind him with a resonant thud that felt oddly final, sealing him within the manor's embrace. The entryway was vast, a cavernous space imbued with the faint, comforting scent of aged paper and something else, something vaguely floral but melancholic, like a forgotten bouquet. Tapestries, depicting muted hunting scenes and mythical beasts, adorned the walls, their colors faded by time. A sweeping grand staircase of dark, polished wood curved upwards, a silent sentinel in the sparse light filtering through the tall, narrow windows. "The library is down this hall to your left," Elysia directed, her voice a little clearer now, as if she were consciously trying to dispel the suffocating silence. "It's the circuit that controls the main lighting. It just went out, without warning." Thad nodded, trying to regain his professional composure, despite the unsettling pull of her presence, the way his gaze kept straying to the elegant curve of her neck. He walked ahead, his work boots echoing on the polished flagstones, and she followed, her steps almost soundless, like a shadow. The library was even larger than he'd envisioned, a veritable sanctuary of knowledge, its walls lined floor to ceiling with venerable, leather-bound tomes. Dust motes, caught in a single, audacious shaft of sunlight that penetrated the heavy velvet curtains, danced in the air, illuminating a formidable, dark wood desk and several deeply upholstered armchairs. The air here was thicker, saturated with the rich scent of old paper, dust, and something indefinable that hinted at long-held secrets. He set his heavy toolbox down on a small, ornate side table near a towering bookshelf and opened it, the clink of metal against metal sounding jarringly loud in the quiet. He pulled out his trusty voltage meter and a precision screwdriver. "Right. I'll just need to locate the main panel. Do you happen to know where it is, Mrs. Vance?" She paused, her gaze drifting towards a cleverly concealed door behind a massive built-in bookshelf. "It's in the servants' quarters, through that door." Silas. Mr. Vance had a rather elaborate system. He preferred to have everything tucked away. A fleeting expression, unreadable yet undeniably complex, flickered across her features, a fleeting shadow of something unresolved. Thad nodded, acknowledging her words, and moved towards the hidden door. It was seamlessly integrated, a testament to antique craftsmanship. He found the small brass latch, almost imperceptible, and pushed the door open. Beyond lay a narrow, dimly lit corridor that smelled faintly of disuse, of forgotten lives. He flicked on his headlamp, its beam cutting a stark path through the gloom. "I'll be a few minutes. If you need anything at all, Mrs. Vance, just call out." She nodded, but remained rooted in the library doorway, her gaze fixed on his retreating figure. "Take your time, Mr. Merriweather. There's no rush." Her voice was so quiet, so laden with an almost desperate patience, that he barely caught the last part. He disappeared into the labyrinthine gloom, following the corridor's winding path until he found the breaker panel, a large, intimidating metal box bolted to a damp stone wall. He spent the next 20 minutes systematically checking each circuit, his brow furrowed in concentration, the air thick with the faint, metallic scent of electricity. This wasn't a simple tripped breaker. It was a deeper fault, a whisper of short-circuited energy somewhere within the ancient wiring embedded in the manor's very bones. This was going to demand more than a quick fix. This was going to take time. You won't believe who took his side. This is just the start. It gets stronger. When Thad emerged from the dim servants' quarters, wiping a smear of grime from his forehead, Elysia was still standing in the library doorway, gazing out into the shadowy room as if lost in a reverie. She turned as he approached, her hazel eyes meeting his, and he felt that familiar, subtle jolt. "Any luck, Mr. Merriweather?" she asked, her voice quiet. He sighed, shaking his head slowly. "It's not a simple switch flip, Mrs. Vance. It looks like there's a short somewhere in the main line feeding this room. It's deeply embedded. I'll need to open up some of the decorative wall panels, trace the wiring. It's going to take a while, I'm afraid. And it'll make a bit of a mess." A flicker of something. Disappointment? Resignation? Crossed her face, quickly veiled. "I see. And how long do you estimate that will take?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "Hard to say, exactly. Could be a few hours, could be longer. These old houses, the wiring can be remarkably tricky, like untangling 100 years of forgotten thoughts." He hesitated, then added, his own voice softening, "I can come back tomorrow, if that's better. I don't want to inconvenience you further." She shook her head, a slow, deliberate movement. No, please, continue. I'd prefer to have it done. The darkness in here can be rather stifling." Her gaze swept around the library, and for a fleeting instant He thought he saw a hint of genuine fear in her eyes, a deep-seated dread of the encroaching shadows. "All right then," he said, feeling a strange sense of protective responsibility settle over him, an unfamiliar weight in his chest. "I'll need to get some more specialized tools from the truck, and a taller ladder." He walked back outside, the cool, crisp air a momentary reprieve from the heavy, almost suffocating atmosphere of the manor. As he rummaged in the back of his truck for a larger toolbox, his heavy artillery, and a robust collapsible ladder, he couldn't shake the image of Elysia Vance standing in the dim library, her quiet plea for light echoing in his mind. He knew this was just a job, a service call like any other, but something about her vulnerability, her quiet desperation for illumination, made it feel profoundly different. There was a fragile intimacy already forming, an unspoken connection that was subtly altering the professional landscape. Returning to the library, laden with his equipment, he found her sitting in one of the plush armchairs, a large leather-bound book open on her lap, though her gaze was fixed on the unlit, cavernous fireplace, lost in thought. She looked up as he entered, and a faint flush touched her cheeks, as if she'd been caught in a private, unguarded moment. "Right," Thad said, trying to keep his voice even, to sound purely businesslike. "I'll start by carefully examining the wall behind that grand bookshelf. Often, the main lines run there, hidden in the labyrinth of the old construction." He spent the next hour meticulously examining the walls, tapping, listening intently, and eventually, with a series of quiet clicks and careful prying, he managed to open a section of the ornate decorative paneling. Dust motes, disturbed by his careful work, danced wildly in the narrow, focused beam of his headlamp, illuminating the ancient, brittle wires within. Elysia remained in the armchair, silently observing him, her presence a constant, almost palpable hum in the room. He felt her eyes on him occasionally, a warmth on his skin that made his movements a little more self-conscious, a little less fluid, a little more aware of himself as a man, not just a technician. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of methodical work, he located the fault. A charred, brittle section of old knob and tube wiring, its insulation cracked and crumbling. "Found it," he announced, his voice a little hoarse from the dust and concentration. "Looks like a splice went bad years ago. This old wiring simply isn't designed for modern electrical loads. It's a miracle it hasn't caused more trouble." She rose from the armchair, her movements surprisingly silent, graceful as a whisper. She came closer, peering over his shoulder, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is it dangerous? Was it a risk?" "It was," he replied, looking up at her. Her face was closer than he'd anticipated, and he caught a subtle, intoxicating scent of lilac and something else, something warm, earthy, and inviting, like rich soil after a summer rain. He quickly averted his gaze, focusing intently on the exposed wires, trying to quell the sudden, unfamiliar flutter in his chest. Could have caused a serious fire if it had gone on much longer. "I'll need to replace this entire section, bring it up to code. It's a pretty significant repair, not a quick patch job." "So you'll be here a while longer," she stated, not as a question, but as a quiet, almost wistful observation. "Looks that way," he admitted, feeling a strange lightness in his chest at the thought, a quiet acceptance. "I'll need to run a new length of wire, connect it properly, ensure everything is secure. It's meticulous work." She nodded slowly, then turned and walked back to her armchair, sinking into its plush depths with a soft sigh. The silence settled between them once more, broken only by the rhythmic clicking of Thad's tools and the occasional soft scrape of wire against wood. He worked carefully, meticulously, intensely aware of her silent presence, a strange, nascent intimacy growing in the quiet, fire-lit space. As the afternoon light began its final, reluctant fade, casting longer, deeper shadows across the library's vast expanse, Thad realized with a jolt that he was famished, a hollow ache in his stomach. He also realized he hadn't spoken more than a few functional sentences to Elysia since he'd arrived, save for the brief exchange about the fault. He glanced at his watch. It was nearly 5. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice surprisingly loud in the stillness, making her start slightly, her head lifting from her contemplation of the dying light. "It's getting late. I'm going to need to pick up some more specific gauges of wire and a new junction box. I don't keep absolutely everything on the truck for a repair of this scope. I can get them from the electrical supply store in Willow Creek. I can be back first thing in the morning to finish." She looked at him, her hazel eyes unreadable in the deepening twilight. "Willow Creek is quite a drive, isn't it?" "About an hour each way, yeah," he confirmed, feeling a subtle wave of disappointment that the day was ending. She paused, then pushed herself out of the armchair, her movements fluid and unhurried. "There's a small, local hardware store right here in Oak Haven. It might have what you need. It's on Elm Street, just past the old mill." Thad hadn't known about it. He usually stuck to his established, larger suppliers. "Oh, right, thanks. I'll check there first then, save myself some travel time. And Mr. Merriweather," she continued, her voice softer now, almost hesitant, a delicate thread in the quiet room. "Have you had anything to eat?" He realized with a jolt that he hadn't eaten since a hasty breakfast, his stomach rumbling in response to the thought. No, not since this morning," he admitted, feeling a flush creep up his neck. "Please," she said, her gaze meeting his, and this time he saw a glimmer of something warm, almost inviting in their depths, a quiet plea. "Allow me to offer you something. It's the least I can do, given the unexpected extent of the repairs. You've worked tirelessly." He felt a sudden surge of something akin to panic, a wild, protective instinct to decline. This wasn't part of the job. He was here to fix a circuit, not to dine with the reclusive, enigmatic widow of Stonehurst Manor. "Oh, Mrs. Vance, you really don't have to. I can grab something on my way back." "I insist," she said, her tone gentle but surprisingly firm, a quiet resolve in her voice. "You've been working diligently for hours. It's no trouble at all. I was just about to prepare something simple for myself." She paused, then added, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "Unless you have other commitments?" He didn't. Not really. His evening consisted of leftover pizza and catching up on repair manuals. He swallowed, the air suddenly thick with unspoken possibility, with a quiet invitation that transcended mere hospitality. "No, no commitments. Thank you, Mrs. Vance." That's very kind of you." A faint, genuine smile touched her lips then, transforming her face in a way that made his breath catch, a rare glimpse of warmth. "Please, call me Elysia. If we're to be in this extended arrangement." "Thad," he responded, his voice a little rougher than he intended, a slight tremor in the word. "Please call me Thad." She nodded, and for a moment, the heavy atmosphere of the library seemed to lift, replaced by a fragile, almost hopeful quiet. A shared understanding. She turned, walking towards the hidden door that led to the servants' quarters, then glanced back over her shoulder, her gaze lingering on him for a beat too long. "The kitchen is through here, Thad. Just follow me." What happens now, no one expected, but it's what restores fairness. The kitchen of Stonehurst Manor was a revelation, a vibrant contrast to the rest of the house's shadowed grandeur. Unlike the library and entryway, steeped in history and oppressive gloom, this space was surprisingly bright, almost cheerfully so, with large uncurtained windows overlooking a sprawling, somewhat wild garden. Sunlight, though fading, still poured in, illuminating modern appliances that gleamed amidst older, more traditional elements of flagstone and dark wood. The air was filled with the comforting, earthy scent of fresh herbs and the subtle sweetness of something freshly baked. Thad felt even more out of place here, standing awkwardly in the middle of the polished flagstone floor, his tools still back in the library, a sudden, self-conscious awareness of his work-worn clothes. Can I help with anything, Elysia?" he offered, feeling foolish the moment the words left his mouth, like a boy trying to be useful. She turned from the large butcher-block island, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "No, Thad. You've done enough demanding work for one day. Please make yourself comfortable." She gestured to a small, round antique table in the corner, already set with two simple placemats, ceramic plates, and gleaming cutlery. "It won't be long. Just a simple minestrone. I find it comforting on a day like this, particularly when the house decides to act up." He sat, the smooth, cool wood of the antique chair a grounding presence beneath him. He watched her as she moved about the kitchen, her movements fluid and unhurried, a quiet grace in her every action. The earlier weariness in her eyes seemed to have lessened, replaced by a quiet focus as she chopped vegetables with practiced ease, her knife a rhythmic counterpoint to the soft hum of the refrigerator. He noticed the faint, delicate lines around her eyes when she smiled, the elegant curve of her neck as she leaned over the stove, stirring the contents of a large copper pot. He found himself drawn to the quiet efficiency of her movements, the subtle dance of her hands, the almost mesmerizing way she existed within the space. It was a strange, unfamiliar pull, one that made his chest feel both tight with anticipation and oddly expansive, a sense of something new blooming within him. "So, you're from Willow Creek?" she asked, her voice breaking the comfortable silence, a welcome distraction from his internal musings. "Yeah," he confirmed, his voice a little husky. "Been there my whole life, pretty much. My uncle started the business there. My dad worked for him before that. It's kind of a family thing, fixing things, making them right." She nodded, stirring the pot on the stove, the steam rising in fragrant tendrils. "And you enjoy it? The work itself, I mean?" "Most of the time," he admitted, a genuine smile touching his lips. "There's something profoundly satisfying about taking something broken and making it work again. Especially the old stuff. Things with a history to it, you know? It's got a story etched into its circuits, its gears. Like this house." He gestured vaguely with his hand, encompassing the grand old manor. She turned to him, a thoughtful, almost wistful expression on her face, her eyes holding his for a beat longer than necessary. "Yes, Thad, I understand that perfectly. There's a certain respect, isn't there, for things that have endured, things that carry the weight of time and experience, things that have stories etched into their very fabric." Her gaze drifted to the sun-drenched window, her eyes distant, filled with a quiet, private sorrow that hinted at a vast, unspoken past. This house, it certainly has its stories. More than most. He didn't press her, sensing the quiet pain that lay just beneath the surface of her words, a raw wound unhealed by time. Instead, he simply watched her, taking in the way the soft kitchen light illuminated the faint silver threads woven into her rich auburn hair, glinting like forgotten stars in a dark sky. He felt a quiet reverence for her, a nascent understanding of the burdens she carried. Soon, two steaming, aromatic bowls of minestrone were placed before him, along with a basket of crusty, artisanal bread, still warm from the oven. The aroma was intoxicating, a comforting balm after a long, physically demanding day. "Thank you, Elysia," he said, his voice imbued with genuine gratitude. "This smells absolutely incredible." "It's nothing fancy," she replied, taking her seat opposite him, her movements unhurried, graceful. "Just a simple, nourishing meal. Sometimes simplicity is what's needed most." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the gentle clinking of spoons against ceramic and the soft murmur of the simmering soup. Thad found himself relaxing, the deep-seated tension that had gripped him since arriving at Stonehurst Manor slowly dissipating, replaced by a quiet sense of ease. The soup was indeed comforting, rich and flavorful, warming him from the inside out, and he realized just how truly, deeply hungry he was. "You're very skilled, Thad," she said suddenly, making him look up, her voice breaking the gentle quiet. Her hazel eyes met his across the small table, and he felt that familiar, unsettling warmth spread through him, a subtle electric charge. to diagnose the issue so quickly and with such confidence. My late husband Silas, he often struggled with things mechanical. He was more theoretical, abstract. There was a brief pause, a subtle shift in her expression, a fleeting shadow that passed over her features. He would have appreciated your practical aptitude, your way with tangible things. The mention of her husband, Silas Vance, cast a momentary, almost imperceptible pall over the easy atmosphere they had cultivated. Thad felt a flicker of discomfort, a sudden awareness of the unspoken history that permeated the very walls of this house. Just years of practice, Elysia, and a good uncle who taught me everything worth knowing. He tried to steer the conversation back to safer, more neutral ground. "So, you've lived here long?" "For nearly 15 years, she replied, her voice softer now, tinged with a faint, almost imperceptible melancholy. "Since I married Silas." "Before that, I lived in the city, working at a small, independent art gallery. This was quite a change, you can imagine." She sighed, a quiet, almost inaudible sound, a breath released. "A very large change, in every conceivable way." He sensed an unspoken history, a heavy burden of experience she carried with an almost ethereal grace. He wanted to ask more, to understand the subtle sorrow that seemed to cling to her like a forgotten perfume. But he knew it wasn't his place. Not yet. Instead, he simply nodded, offering a silent acknowledgement of her words, a quiet empathy. "And you, Thad?" she asked, gently changing the subject, her gaze kind. "Do you have family in Willow Creek? Siblings?" "Just my uncle and aunt," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, despite the sudden, unexpected intimacy of the question. "My parents. They passed away when I was pretty young. Car accident." He hadn't spoken about it in years, not openly, not like this, to a near stranger. The words felt strange, raw on his tongue, a vulnerable admission. "My uncle took me in after that, taught me the trade. He's been like a father to me, in every sense of the word." Her gaze softened immediately, a deep, empathetic understanding shining in her eyes. "I'm so very sorry, Thad. That's a terrible loss, especially to experience it so young, to carry that kind of sorrow." She reached across the table, her hand resting briefly, lightly on his forearm. Her touch was fleeting, barely there, a whisper of contact, but it sent a profound jolt through him, a jolt that had nothing to do with faulty wiring or electric current. It was warm, comforting, and intensely personal, a silent acknowledgement of his pain, of his very being. He felt his breath catch, and he consciously tried to control the rapid, frantic beat of his heart. "Thank you," he managed, his voice a little hoarse, rough around the edges. He cleared his throat, suddenly finding the grain of the antique table intensely interesting. She withdrew her hand slowly, and the charged moment passed, leaving behind a subtle, lingering warmth on his skin, a ghost of her touch that vibrated through him. They finished their meal in silence, the comfortable quiet returning, but now it was layered with an unspoken current, a fragile awareness of the brief, potent connection that had just passed between them, a silent understanding that transcended words. After they had finished, Elysia rose and began clearing the table, her movements unhurried. "You really don't have to help, Elysia," Thad said, pushing his chair back, feeling a surge of politeness. "Nonsense," she replied, her voice firm but gentle, a hint of steel beneath the softness. "It's my kitchen, after all. Besides," she turned and looked at him, a faint, teasing light in her eyes, a rare flash of levity, "I'm quite capable of clearing a few dishes. You, however, have a rather substantial repair awaiting your attention." "Duty calls, does it not?" He smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached his eyes, a mirroring of her quiet humor. "Right. The wires. Duty calls, indeed." He retrieved his tool bag from the library, its familiar weight a comforting presence, and she led him to a small, well-stocked pantry off the kitchen, where she precisely explained the local hardware store's location. "It's called Oak Haven Hardware Co., she said, her voice clear. "It's on Elm Street, just past the old mill. Mr. Abernathy runs it. Tell him Elysia sent you. He'll take good care of you, I assure you." He nodded, feeling a strange reluctance to leave the quiet warmth of the kitchen, the unexpected intimacy of their shared meal. "Thanks, Elysia. I'll be as quick as I can. I appreciate the directions." "Don't rush on my account, Thad," she said, her voice soft, almost a gentle admonition. "Safety first, always." He drove to Oak Haven Hardware Co. on Elm Street, a small, unassuming brick building that smelled faintly of sawdust, metal, and forgotten paint. Mr. Abernathy, a grizzled, kindly man with surprisingly sharp eyes, indeed took good care of him, helping him find exactly the right gauge of wire, the proper modern junction box, and even offering a few pieces of advice on dealing with old house wiring. Thad paid, the mundane act of commerce a strange, grounding force after the ethereal, unsettling experience of the manor. When he returned, the last vestiges of daylight had completely faded, and the manor was bathed in the soft, inviting glow of interior lights, a stark contrast to the earlier gloom. He saw Elysia in the library as he approached the grand front door, standing near the towering window, a graceful silhouette against the flickering light of the fireplace, which she must have lit while he was gone. The sight sent a strange, unexpected pang through him, a sudden, acute awareness of her solitude, her quiet existence within those vast walls. He lifted the lion's head knocker, but before it could resound, the door opened almost immediately, as if she'd been waiting, listening for his return. "Welcome back, Thad," she said, her voice warm, a soft balm against the cool evening air. "Did you find everything you needed?" "Yes, thanks to your excellent recommendation," he replied, holding up the heavy bag with the new supplies. "Mr. Abernathy was incredibly helpful, a true professional." "He's a good man," she agreed, stepping aside, her gaze lingering on his face for a moment. "The fire's lit in the library. I thought it might make the space feel a little less cavernous while you're working, more comfortable." The library, now illuminated by the dancing amber flames of the fireplace, felt transformed. The shadows still clung to the furthest corners, but the flickering light cast a warm, inviting glow over the towering bookshelves and the plush, ancient furniture. It felt less like a tomb and more like a quiet, living sanctuary, a place where one might linger. He set his new supplies down with a soft thud and returned to the opened wall panel, the exposed wires a tangled puzzle awaiting his resolution. The task of meticulously replacing the charred, brittle wiring was intricate, demanding every ounce of his concentration. He worked steadily, the rhythmic snip of wire cutters and the occasional faint sizzle of his soldering iron filling the quiet room, a comforting counterpoint to the crackling fire. Elysia remained in the armchair, not reading, but simply watching the mesmerizing dance of the flames in the fireplace, her gaze distant, contemplative, lost in some private world. Hours passed, marked only by the shifting light of the fire and the deepening quiet outside. The fire in the hearth crackled companionably, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls, making the old room feel alive, breathing. Thad's back began to ache with a dull throb, and his eyes felt gritty, strained from the intense concentration required by the delicate wiring work. He was nearly finished. Just one more crucial connection, one final meticulous wrap of electrical tape, and then he could test the circuit, bring the light back fully. He sat back on his heels, stretching his weary muscles, a soft groan escaping his lips. "Almost there, Elysia," he announced, his voice raspy from disuse and the dust. She stirred, turning her head slowly to look at him, her eyes soft in the firelight. "You've been working for so long, Thad. Are you all right? You look exhausted." There was genuine, tangible concern in her voice, a warmth that enveloped him. "Just a bit stiff," he admitted, managing a tired, grateful smile. "Old houses, stubborn wires, they demand a certain respect." He leaned in, making the final, delicate connection. There was a faint, satisfying click, then another, a small symphony of success. He reached for the main light switch on the wall, his finger poised over it, a moment of anticipation. He hesitated, then pressed down firmly. With a soft, triumphant hum, the main lights in the library flickered on, then steadied, bathing the vast room in a bright, steady, brilliant glow. The shadows receded, banished by the sudden flood of illumination, defeated by the light. It was as if the room itself let out a collective sigh of profound relief, a breath held for too long. Elysia gasped, a small, surprised sound, a soft intake of breath, and then a slow, radiant smile spread across her face, transforming her features completely. Her eyes, now fully illuminated, sparkled with an almost childlike joy, a pure, unadulterated happiness that stunned him. "Oh, Thad, you did it. It's beautiful." "You truly are a magician." He felt a profound sense of satisfaction, a warmth that had nothing to do with the physical exertion of his work, but everything to do with the unexpected impact he'd had on this woman. Seeing her face light up, seeing the genuine relief and happiness there, was a reward beyond anything monetary. "Yep," he said, a little breathlessly, his voice thick with a quiet triumph. "All fixed, good as new, and safe." He began packing up his tools, the task made lighter by the success, by the radiant glow of her smile. "I'll just need to patch up the wall panel, but that can easily wait until morning. The main thing is the power's back on, securely and safely." She rose from the armchair and walked towards him, her movements unhurried, graceful as a ballet dancer. The soft, even light of the library made her seem ethereal, almost glowing, a figure of quiet luminosity. She stopped just a few feet from him, her gaze fixed on his face, intense and unwavering. "Thad," she began, her voice soft, almost a whispered revelation. "I can't possibly thank you enough. You've brought light back into this room, and into this house." Her eyes, those deep, luminous hazel eyes, held his, and in their depths, he saw not just profound gratitude, but something else, something complex and vulnerable and undeniably powerful, a silent plea. The air between them thickened, charged with an unspoken tension, an almost palpable current that pulled them closer. He felt a tremor go through him, a deep, visceral response to the silent, electric hum that now vibrated between them. He felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to reach out, to bridge the small, almost imperceptible gap that separated them, to touch her, to pull her closer. She took a step closer, then another, until she was standing directly in front of him, so close he could feel the radiating warmth from her body, catch the subtle, intoxicating scent of lilac and old books, and something else, something uniquely her. Her hand, slender and delicate, reached out, and for a terrifying, exhilarating moment, he thought she would touch his face, cup his jaw. Instead, her fingers brushed lightly against his arm, just above the elbow, a fleeting, tender caress that sent a dizzying wave of shivers down his spine, leaving him breathless. "You're not a kid anymore," she said, her voice barely audible, a fragile whisper that seemed to echo in the newly lit, suddenly vast room. Her gaze was intense, unwavering, holding his captive,